Are we actually building a resilient nation, or are we just, completely drowning in political division? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a really structured framework for nation building that tackles this exact problem head-on. It comes to us from Lieutenant Colonel David Redmond. Now, he's a veteran with 27 years of military experience, plus another 13 years in emergency management. He recently laid out this incredibly analytical, military-honed approach to bridging our divides. And honestly, whether we're talking about holding together a unified country or looking at a separatist movement, his perspective is just super grounding.
Okay, let's dive right into his core premise. It's actually pretty straightforward. A 25-year vision is literally the ultimate antidote to political division. Redmond argues that whether a region is trying to heal current political fractures or maybe considering itself as a brand new independent nation, having an articulated quarter-century vision is an absolute non-negotiable requirement. Without this long-term anchor, it's so easy for politicians to just get bogged down in wedge issues. He calls this the noise, and this noise is often intentionally used to fracture citizens rather than pull everyone together.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll quickly go through 1. The context, 2. The foundation, 3. The engine, 4. The geopolitical reality, and finally, 5. The epic conclusion.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the context, specifically a diagnosis of our fractured political climate.
Before a fractured country can actually heal, Redmond points out we have to objectively assess how crises are managed. He contrasts two methods. First, there's governance by confidence. This relies on transparent, published, written plans where citizens actually know what their roles are. It's like having a blueprint everyone can see. The alternative? Governance by fear. This one thrives on an uninformed citizenry, relying on closed-door decisions and, strict control. Redmond neutrally observes that relying on fear inevitably pushes a society toward authoritarianism. So transparent planning isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely crucial for a healthy democracy.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the foundation. We're looking at unity and national security.
This entire framework is built around 6 national interests: unity, national security, good governance, rights and freedoms, economic prosperity, and personal and community well-being. Now, a critical rule here, and this is a big one, is that leaders absolutely must address all 6 of these coherently within that 25-year vision. If they pull out just 1 or 2 isolated points, now they're probably using them as divisive wedge issues. All 6 really need to operate together as one cohesive unit. The absolute bedrock of this whole structure is unity. Redmond argues that the baseline reality is a functioning nation simply cannot be a post-national state. By definition, a nation has to have a citizenry with shared foundational ethics and values, and they need to live within a defined geographic border that they are actually prepared to defend. If you don't have that baseline unity, the rest of the structure just crumbles.
But here's the catch. Unity alone isn't going to protect those borders. Securing a nation is a massive, incredibly complex logistical undertaking. Just take a look at the sheer number of elements required here. We're talking everything from military and intelligence to border services, immigration, policing, and cybersecurity. It really brings up a sobering reality. Any independence movement or new nation has to successfully establish and fund all 10 of these elements totally independently if they want to survive in the modern world. No small feat, right?
Now let's look under the hood. This brings us to Section 3, the engine. We're focusing on governance, rights, and the economy.
What's absolutely fascinating here is Redmond's vision of a deeply participatory democracy. We aren't just talking about ticking a box at a voting booth every few years. The framework points to systems, kind of like the Swiss model, that use frequent citizen referendums to actually write policy. Combine that with transparent officials who can be recalled by voters and a right-sized civil service, and you've got a governance engine that is driven directly by the people. Talk about a real game changer.
But how exactly do citizens relate to their government in this model? Well, picture an 18-year-old standing all alone in the woods. As a newly free adult, they are actively making a choice. They decide to walk out of the forest and join society. In doing so, they're choosing to give up certain absolute freedoms, like, say, not paying taxes, to gain massive societal benefits, like running water, infrastructure, and the rule of law. It really highlights that being part of a nation is an active, ongoing trade-off between your personal autonomy and community protection.
And to pay for the whole shebang, the framework demands a really specific, powerful metric: 70%. At least 70% of a nation's economy has to be driven by the private sector. Why that specific number? Well, it's crucial because it limits bureaucratic overreach. It keeps the civil service right-sized, and most importantly, it generates the actual wealth needed to fund those 10 massive elements of national security we just talked about.
Of course, we have to place these domestic frameworks into the harsh, objective reality of the world stage. That brings us to Section 4, the geopolitical reality, focusing on North American dynamics.
Here we hit a strict, undeniable geopolitical rule. Redmond recounts a really pivotal meeting he had back in 2001 with the U.S. ambassador to Canada right after September 11th. The ambassador looked him in the eye and said something unforgettable. Security trumps trade. To put that into perspective, the reality is pretty stark. The United States will immediately halt all economic trade if it even senses its northern border is insecure or infiltrated by foreign threats.
And this is exactly where the stakes get incredibly high. If a fractured Canada, or let's say a newly independent region, fails to maintain those 10 national security elements and lets foreign threats take root, we run straight into the historical doctrine of manifest destiny. The warning here is clear. The U.S. may feel forced to intervene just to secure the continent. That would effectively end any hopes of true independence or sovereignty for sure.
So, how on earth do we prevent that scenario? We turn to our final piece, Section 5, the epic conclusion, looking at the standard for leadership and citizen engagement. This standard is built around a super memorable acronym that Redmond taught to young military officers to carry for life. EPIC. A leader must be ethically fit, physically fit, and intellectually fit. But here's the kicker. Those three, they are completely useless without the C, courage. You need the courage to apply your ethics and intellect every single day, especially when it's politically unpopular or uncomfortable.
Which brings us right back around to you, the viewer. This entire framework is really a call to action. It's asking us to demand comprehensive, long-term visions from our leaders. So think about it. What is your 25-year vision? Are we demanding policies that actually build a resilient, confident nation? Or are we just settling for the noise that leaves us fractured? I invite you to reflect on this epic framework, get more deeply engaged with the civic process, and start demanding that 25-year vision today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.